So today I thought we would just hang out together as we kind of probably are all moving into sort of a more unwind, relaxed time, family time. Maybe you're traveling, getting ready to head over to see people for this long holiday week. Probably most of us are taking a lot of this next week off, but I thought we'd hang out and talk about whatever you'd like to talk about related to relationships, related to mental health. Maybe as you try to navigate a complicated family situation that you normally don't have to handle, but you're going to have to because you're going to see people that you haven't seen in a while, ready or not. So the rules of the room are, please put your thumbs up in front of your comments or questions so that I know that you're talking to me and not just talking to each other. But, and also we don't talk about politics, religion, or my looks, but everything else is fair game. So I'd be looking forward to having you, what's on your mind? How are you guys doing? Oh, we got a great question right off the top. What is narcissistic abuse? So let's jump into that. I've been seeing that lately. People want to know, how does that differ from abuse? Why are we calling it narcissistic abuse and not just abuse? I think that's a really good question and legitimate. And prior to me knowing a lot about narcissistic abuse, I would have been confused and wouldn't have known the difference between those two things either. So let's start with, to me, abuse is a very broad category that involves anything that relates to an invalidation of a person, of your feelings, that doesn't give you the space to be yourself, to feel free to show up and express yourself, whether that is you don't have a freedom of spirituality, financial freedom, you don't feel maybe a freedom to emotionally to express where you're at and how you're doing. Maybe you don't have a freedom to express your thoughts and opinions. Maybe you don't physically feel free. Maybe you feel physically unsafe in some level. So it's a very broad category that kind of encompasses everything: financial, spiritual, emotional, psychological, even your environment, by the way. We often don't think of that too. Abuse could occur environmentally. It could be that you're deprived of the ability to have quiet, to be able to sleep, that you don't get fed at any regular intervals or even get fed healthily. I know when I was back in the day when I was working with children, one of the things that protective services would assess was, is there enough food in the house? Do the kids have a place to sleep that's reasonable, that provides safety? So that's a very large way of thinking of abuse. It's creates space for you to show up fully as yourself. Now, how does narcissistic abuse differ? Narcissistic abuse is a subset of abuse, and there's a really wonderful definition by Dr. Kristen Milstead on Psych Central. So if you go over to Psych Central and put in, or actually if you just even type into Google, what is narcissistic abuse, you'll see some of the Psych Central comments come up, or I'm sorry, pages come up, and one of them is, it says, what is narcissistic abuse? She says, and I think this is fascinating, it is a deceptive setup. I'm paraphrasing. This is not how exactly she sets it up, but it's a deceptive perspective that the person seems to be invested in the other person, but the investment is only to get supply. So there's a perspective that this person has true interest in a relationship of some kind with this individual, but it isn't really actually an authentic relationship that's going to be mutual and reciprocal. Instead, it's a setup for some form of supply. Now, what is supply? It could be adoration. It could be that you want this person submission. It could be you're looking for their money, or maybe for sex, or maybe you even want a place to stay. It could be as simple as maybe you want to use their car. But there's a setup so that you have this access to whatever this resource is from this person. And you act as if the reason you're in the relationship is because you want actually a relationship with them. And you set yourself up in a way that makes it look like you're authentically engaged in that person for the relationship, but really it is for ulterior motives. And the world around you also doesn't know either. They think this is authentic relationship and that you're a good person who really wants to share your life or share something with this person, but it actually is in order to get the asset. So there's a deceptive component to it. And that makes it really hard to identify that this is abuse. And it makes it really hard to identify that you're being abused to the outside world because they don't see it either. It's subtle, it's insidious, and it's often behind closed doors. And that creates this unique situation. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, that cognitive dissonance doesn't happen in normal abusive situations. Yes, it does. But cognitive dissonance, I suspect, is a lot higher in narcissistic abuse because of the deception, because of the purposeful misleading of what the intention of the person's motives are for the relationship. I'm thinking of, somebody just said, well, 90% of men qualify then. Well, actually, 90% of, I'm not for sure 90% of women or men qualify, but I can think of, for instance, when both men and women particularly are engaged in this deception. Let's take dating, for example. So if a woman gets into a relationship and she just really actually wants someone to take her out and she's lonely, but she makes it act like she's into this guy and she's not, yes, that's deceptive. Yes, that would be a mild form of narcissistic abuse. But it also happens the opposite side. And the opposite side is men who get into a relationship with a woman when they have no intention to have a relationship, they act like they do in order to be able to have sex. And maybe they even stay too long, and when they already know they're not going to stay with this person, but they stick around a little longer because they hope maybe they'll have one more hookup before they say goodbye. So both sides, both genders are guilty of this, and yes, it kind of presents differently based upon the genders. Now, another question is, does it always have to be a narcissist who engages in the abuse? No, it does not. You don't need to be a narcissist in order to narcissistically abuse somebody. In fact, the theorists who are talking about narcissistic abuse don't like this label. And the label happened in social media. It didn't happen in the theoretical rooms. You know, it didn't happen in the academia. It happened out in social media. They would more likely call it pathological relationships or pathological, like narcissistic pathological relationships or pathological love relationships. I don't like that term because to me it's too narrow. It doesn't just happen between people who are in love with each other. It also happens in families and in work and neighborhoods, and it happens all over the place. But yeah, it does not need to be done by a narcissist. It can be done by anybody who's unhealthy, frankly. It really can. There's been a couple questions came over in Instagram. So I'm going to back up and take them. And by the way, I'm live on both Instagram and YouTube. I'm sorry. I soon will be going live on YouTube. Next week, I'll start doing that. But right now, I'm live on TikTok and on Instagram. And make sure you put your thumbs up so I know that you're talking to me and not talking to other people. And the way to get this to be just to have more attention to this is we're cold in the United States, but whenever I close all the curtains, it starts to get really warm. So I'm starting to get really warm in here. But I hope you guys are staying warm. Those of you who are in the United States, we're under a big Arctic freeze. And I hope you guys, even here in Texas, it's 40 degrees in Texas. So they think that tomorrow might be the coldest day we have this year, maybe. That will be interesting. But stay warm, everybody. So Sandy over in Instagram says, I'm now just recognized that I'm being abused, that I left my home this past week. So many people are not understanding my decision to leave. And how do I combat the sense of loneliness? Boy, I know a lot of us can identify with you, Sandy, that's what makes narcissistic abuse so insidious is because it's difficult to recognize, and because the person that you've been in a relationship with has such a good public persona. It's called a mask of sanity. I think that's a great way to capture it. It came out of literature in the 1950s. I can't remember the name of the researcher who said that, but it's a really great way to identify what you're experiencing is that those around you thought you were in a relationship with a really wonderful person because they acted like a really wonderful person in public. And, which, by the way, side note there, that's another way that you know that this is under control. I mean, if they could behave in public and they don't lose it everywhere, then they didn't need to be losing it with you either. Just a side note, we often think, well, do they really know that they do this? And can't they control themselves? And yes, well, because they're not losing relationships outside of the home. They're just not caring about what happens in the home. So how do you combat the sense of loneliness? I would love to know what others of you think. How are you combating loneliness after you left a narcissistic abusive relationship? one comment I want to say to you, Sandy, is that the initial phase right after you leave, right after you leave is the worst. So you're in the worst period right now. What makes it hard, extra hard, is you don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know whether you're going to feel this way for a few days, or you're going to feel this way for a few weeks, or it's going to feel this way for a few months. But what I would really recommend is you breathe, you keep focusing on the things that relearning yourself. I don't know how long you were in this relationship, but begin to do the things that you used to do before that were really important to you. Connect with the people that you may have lost track with. Get out. Don't stay locked in and alone. Yes, you may find it hard to share this with people who knew both of you, but find those who had primarily a relationship with you and focus on those relationships. I want to let you know, if people over here are saying friends, you hang out with friends, journaling is very, very helpful. Another one person said, treat your isolation as peacefulness. I think that's a really great suggestion. I love that. Treat it as peacefulness. Also, the online community is really, really helpful. And I do have a premium private group. It's based on subscriptions. So if you become a subscriber on Instagram or TikTok, you're automatically invited to that group. You can also subscribe through a membership. It's sort of like Patreon's called Coffee. And that's another way for you get an automatic membership. In fact, next week, this upcoming Wednesday, we're going to hang out together on a video chat, all of us in that group. So everybody gets an invitation to a Zoom call, and we come together and we just sort of like talk and deconnect. We kind of decompress and we connect and hang out. So that's another idea, is to join an online support group like that. I'm going to jump over to TikTok, and take a question, and then go back to Instagram. And yeah, thank you for the reminder to please put them up, of thumbs up in front of it, so I know that you guys are talking to me. Can I explain, because New Horizon asked a really great question, and Spanish Eyes, I see your question underneath of it, but New Horizon asked, can I explain cognitive dissonance and intermittent reinforcement in an abusive relationship? Wow, that's a great one. Okay, they're two different things, and the intermittent reinforcement increases the cognitive dissonance. So that's how they connect, is that way. So let's take intermittent reinforcement first. It's out of classical behavioral psychology. So think of Pavlov's dog, where they rang a bell and they fed them, and then over a period of time they learned that when they rang the bell, the dogs would start to salivate in anticipation of getting fed. That we learn to associate actions to behavior. We start to learn there's consequences to events, that life is predictable. We start to build that sense of that. So then they began to look at, how does reinforcement work? So they realized that the bell acted as reinforcement. They rang the bell, the dog started to salivate. Could they begin to train to other, like in different intervals or different could they like ring the bell 5 times and have them not salivate to the 5th time? Could they teach them that? By the way, I actually had I'm just remembering this. I had a science project back in 9th grade where I trained a dove to peck the certain number. I had written numbers on top of like seed trays, and they had this dove had to peck the right number in order to get the seeds. Would you know? The dove learned which number to peck. Yes, so you can train mammals and other types of animals to perform, and we are too. We're part of the all of living things, and we are also classically trained as well. So certain things cause us to have certain reactions. So there's different intervals. It could be like, for example, in the bell situation, every ring equals getting fed. But it could be an interval of rings, like every 5th ring, or it could be every 15 minutes you get fed. And then they would learn over a period of time what 15 minutes felt like, and they would come over and start checking the bin every 15 minutes. But intermittent reinforcement, what they found was, if they kept the amount of the payoff unpredictable, and they kept the rate of the reinforcement, the interval rate variable, in other words, unpredictable, think of Las Vegas lottery machines. So see, you don't know how many quarters or coins, it's probably not quarters these days, probably dollars. You don't know how many coins you've got to put in the slot machine until it pays out. It's a variable rate. It's not predictable. It's not every 5th time. It's not every 15 minutes. It's some number. and it might be 3 times this time, and it might be 150 times the next time, and it might be 1,000,000 times the next time. You never know how many times somebody's got to feed that machine. And you also don't know how big the payout. It could be 7,000 this time. Maybe the next time it's going to be 10 million. You don't know. What they found was when you do that, when you keep all of that unpredictable, not predictable, that your association that you make, the connection that you make to whatever it is that you're learning is really tight. It's extremely resilient to being what's called in psychology extinguished. In other words, they measure, okay, once we teach you this skill, how long does it take to teach you to break the skill? Like if we stop doing this, if we start ringing the bell and then you never get fed, how long does it take you to learn that ringing the bell now means you will not get fed? How long does it take to extinguish that behavior? They found that with the interval rate of reinforcement, had the longest rate of, was very difficult to extinguish. It was in other words, what I'm saying, and I haven't said, is it's very addictive, very addictive. So how does that relate to abuse, and how does that relate to cognitive dissonance? Well, cognitive dissonance, real quick, let me explain what that is. If you looked it up on the textbook, on a college textbook, it is any time that you have to make a decision between two things that you kind of have some moral feelings about, moral value, like ethical value. Like today, I debated what to have for lunch. My stomach's been really fussy. I've been on a new medication, and I had to figure out how much protein and how much carbs. And I really knew what I wanted to eat, which is something with dairy, and dairy and I are not friends, so I erred in the direction away from dairy. But you see that I had to think about it. And there for a second, I looked longingly at a bagel and loved to put some sour cream or cream cheese on it, or put some cheese on it. But like I said, dairy and I are not friends. That moment, and when I looked at the bagel, I had experience of cognitive dissonance. I really want that. That would be a great example of normal cognitive dissonance. But what happens in abusive relationships is, remember I said narcissistic abuse is set up of a deception. You don't know the person's not really in a relationship for you. They're in a relationship for the supply. Maybe you're the supply, or the idealized version of you is the supply. Maybe the supply is money. Maybe the supply is having a place to live. But you don't know that. You think they're in the relationship with you. But you sense it. You sense something's wrong or off. And because you sense something's wrong or off, you feel this jarring, like it's not adding up inside. You can't put it in words, but you just sense it's not quite right. That's dissonance. And it gets worse as a relationship starts to deteriorate. When you find out the first betrayal or the first deception, when you start to see this pattern of the Mr. Hyde popping up or the Ms. Hyde popping up, you start to increasingly ask yourself, should I be in this relationship? Is this a good relationship? Is this person good? All of that, those questions are examples of dissonance. And then near the end of it, when you start to really feel stuck, you start to ask yourself, why am I in the relationship? I know I should be leaving, but I'm still here. Again, that's all part of dissonance. Okay, so how does intermittent reinforcement and cognitive dissonance connect? The way that a person who's being deceptive or manipulative or exploitive keeps you in a relationship when it's really not for you. They don't really want the relationship with you. It's all that part is you're not the reason they're in the relationship. They're in the relationship for what you can do for them. Whether, like I said, is financially take care of them, maybe make them feel really good, maybe to look good on their arm, maybe to pay for stuff, whatever it is. It's what you're going to do for them. But they want you to stay. They know that you don't want to be used. And once you figure out you're being used, you're going to leave. So they use intermittent reinforcement. We often talk about it we use the term called breadcrumbing. They use this, oh, you're the best thing ever. I love you so much. Or they'll do something great for you, or they'll show up in your favorite way, or whatever. And in the beginning, they did that a lot, and they did it really well. But as the relationship starts to get older and more tired, and they get more disillusioned with you and the relationship and the efforts that it takes to keep the relationship going, it gets less and less and less. And remember, it's intermittent reinforcement. So you had a lot of it, and then they withheld it. And they had a lot of it, and then they withheld it. And maybe had a little bit of it, and then they withheld it. And then maybe they showed up really big, and then they withheld it. Because it was the interval, you got really connected, really stuck, really addicted to this experience. You didn't know that you were, but that's what they were doing by doing that. They were binding you to them, bonding you to them, so that you needed less over time for you to stay engaged, because it would do the same thing for you. It would give you the same, connection, the same jolt, the same dopamine hit that you had before. So it didn't take as much for you to be stuck. Now, I want to jump into something, and this wasn't asked, but I want to say this because this is where people go. And I know, because I've talked enough to all of us to know where we go with it, so I want to add this. It's easy to blame the victim for that. Well, you should have known that they're giving you less and it really wasn't good, so why don't you just leave? Why wasn't that enough for you to, you should have seen it. You should have seen it, that it was pathetic effort, low effort, and got the hell out of there. What's wrong with you for staying? Okay, I hear it all the time, and I got it. When I was in a relationship like that, I heard that. Well, what people don't understand is that you often don't have a conscious recognition of what's happening. You're not really aware. And on top of it, it's kind of, because it's happened to you, it's sort of like for me to say, just because you smell bacon, stop salivating. Say that someone starts to cook breakfast in the house, or you walk past a restaurant. It's for me to say, well, what's wrong with you? You should know better. You shouldn't have that reaction. Well, but you do, because that's the way our mind and our bodies work. It works like they're using something that's hardwired into you against you. So for us to attack people for not seeing it or not knowing how to get out of it, remember, there's a deception. It wouldn't be a deception if there wasn't a deception. So we need to be kinder on the victim, and we really need to place the onus of the burden of responsibility on the person doing it. People should be authentic. They should be honest. If you don't really want a relationship, but you just want a place to stay, say, I need a place to stay. If you don't really want a relationship and you just want sex, say, I just want sex. If you don't really want a relationship, but you want someone to take you out to dinner, then say, I just want someone to take me out to dinner, or whatever it is. It's the deception that's the problem, not the desires that we have. It's the deception. Great question. Big question. So thanks so much for letting me unpack it. Horcrux Bane. Oh, I love that. Horcrux Bane. Quick question. I know my ex is a narcissist, but why do I still miss him after years of separation? Yeah, I hope that my long explanation about this makes more sense for your situation as well, because you've had this really intense relationship with somebody. It may have been toxic. It may have been manipulative, and you may have known that it wasn't good for you, but because of the intermittent reinforcement, and because of the good times that you had, and because the deception was so well done, you think you knew who you were in a relationship with, and you really weren't. So some advice to you, Horcrux. That's Horcrux. That's a hard one to say. I see this as grieving the person that you wished existed but never actually did. That's what I had to do. I had to realize that the Dr. Jekyll that I thought, and maybe in your situation, some of us is a Ms. Jekyll. It's not maybe a Dr. Jekyll, or I guess that's actually gender neutral name. The Dr. Jekyll you met was a projection of you. It was the best parts of you. It was you meeting yourself, and that's what was so wonderful about that. They're very good. They're like almost reptilian in their ability, predatorily reptilian in their ability to mimic us and show up like us. It's amazing. I know I've shared this before, but I'll share it again. You guys may not have heard me say this. My ex, it was interesting. He had relationships that he knew was going to be really brief, and he had relationships he knew was going to be longer, and longer ones he's kind of set up with more boundaries. So he gave me some boundaries of what he would do and wouldn't do. But with one of the women I found out later he was having a relationship with, so one of his boundaries, I forgot to tell you what, one of them is he hated animals. He hated pets. He told me, I will not live with a pet, which was fine. I didn't have one, so it was no big deal to me. But one of the women he was in a relationship with had 5 dogs, and I'm not talking tiny things. I'm talking like 60, 70, 80, 90-pound animals that she slept with. And he was having a relationship with her. Why would he do that when he hated? I mean, he told me stories of how much he hated them, like nasty stories. Like this guy, I believed him. He hated animals. his history made sense. So why would he do that? Well, for her, he showed up like a guy who really didn't mind animals and liked the things that she liked. And for me, he showed up as a person who really liked the things that I liked and did the things that I did. But neither person existed. And that's how I help myself process this. When I start to miss that person, I remind myself that he didn't exist, that he died. That's how I say it. He died. Or you could just say to yourself, he never existed. Okay, so I'm going to move down and take some more questions here on TikTok. Yeah, and thank you guys for liking and sharing this so much. It really helps with the attendance here and gets this out so people know that we're having this live and we're talking about relationships. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. I don't want to miss a question. So Maurice asked, I'm taking care of myself afterwards after 2 narcissistic relationships and I'm not dating anymore. That's Maura. Maura is saying that. That's awesome. You know, I've been doing the same. I've now gone 1.5 years and I've not dated anybody. You know, and I think about it and I'm actually on dating app. It's not like I'm not on a dating app, but when I start to get closer to thinking about dating, most of the time it's hard to find someone that's mutually in the same spot as I am in life and looking for the same things that I'm in life. So there's not a lot of matches for me at this place in my life, which is fine. But whenever I start to think about that and imagine myself being back in a relationship, I feel like I'm not ready either in some ways. Like one of the things I'd love to know why you feel not ready, Maura, but one of the things I'm realizing why I feel not ready is that I want to be able to hold on to myself when I'm in a relationship. I've been in a relationship for really long periods of time. My first husband and I were together for 31 years. It wasn't narcissistically abusive, but there were a few toxic things about it that weren't great. And one was he kind of ran the show and I did a lot of too much work around the house. And, you know, he loved me a lot, but I didn't always feel very seen by him. And it was really important to keep him happy. I mean, there was a lot of he was sort of the focus, you know, life needed to be his way. You know how they say when mama ain't happy, no one's happy. Well, in his case, if Brad wasn't happy, nobody was happy. So, you know, and then I got into this really toxic relationship. So for me, I want to be able to be in a relationship and hold on to myself, really hold on to myself and not sacrifice or accommodate too much. And so I'm enjoying that. I'm really enjoying my singlehood right now because it's all about me. It's what I want, when I want, the way I want it. And I'm finding that's really freeing. I love that. It feels awesome. You know, in fact, I don't really know if I want to be so-called, quote unquote, a wife again. I don't know if I plan to ever take care of anybody ever again. I did that for a very long time. I don't really want to do that again. I raised 3 kids, so you know, I'm glad they're all doing well and on their own. So I hear you. I hear you on that. How do you know that you're not the narcissist? You know, okay, so thank you for that question, Esmeralda. That really gives me a good lead in. I want to start a new series on TikTok and especially for YouTube. This is going to be really even a bigger focus on YouTube. So YouTube, by the way, for everybody who's following me, is going to be my primary platform going forward. So it won't get the first short content. TikTok will still get the first short content. So if you want to know what I'm putting out today, the way to know that is go to TikTok and follow me there. Instagram, you're about a few days behind. But Instagram has things that I don't put on TikTok. It allows me to put posts over there. I sometimes write. I'm a writer first, so sometimes I write over there and put down some of my opinions. So yes, Instagram gets me in a way that TikTok does not get to see that side of me. But YouTube will have the longer content. And I'm starting a series in 2023 where you know how like social media managers will tell you like, how do you post on Instagram? And it says like, well, first this is how you turn a camera on and this is how you do the settings. And they kind of step you through the whole how-to of everything. Well, I thought I would do the same with a pathological love relationship. I would literally break it all down from start to finish, from before you meet them all the way to what happens after you're out and you're healing. And I'm calling the series right now, tentatively, I'm going to call the series called Toxic Love. That's going to be the name of the series. We're going to post it once a week. It's going to be an 8+ minute video on Mondays. That's when the posting is going to go up. It's going to go up on Mondays. So that will start. The first one will be January 9th is the first one. So I'm super excited because I actually have a year's content planned out. So I know where I'm going to go for the whole year. We got all lined up. But one of the things I want to do in extra, and that ties into what you just asked me, Esmeralda, is I want to do, you guys ever watch Matt Pfeiffer's channel? He has a Reddit series that he pulls out of Reddit. It's called Who's the Asshole? Or it's called Am I the Asshole? I love it. It's great because he reads the story and then asks who's the asshole. And then we all get to vote. Well, I want to do a series called Who's the Narcissist? That's my series. Is going to be. So in addition to toxic love on breakdown of a pathological love relationship, I'm going to do a periodical one, like maybe a couple times a month or maybe once a month, of Who's the Narcissist? So how you could all help me is you can send me your story. You can maybe send me a videotape that you have or a video that you happen to see that you find really confusing. I don't mind if it's personal or if it's public, but if it's personal, it can't have names. It can't include anything that's identifying of either parties. And I really prefer not to see the faces of the people unless they know and consented. I would need proof that whoever is on the video has consented to having me use it, because I would be using it. So if you see something that's been posted on YouTube, or maybe it's a public figure, or maybe it's something on TikTok and you think, wow, who's the narcissist here? Send it over my direction and I would be happy to take that up as possible content. I'd happy to review it and consider that as fitting in that series. So let's answer your question. How do you know if you're the healthy one or if you're the narcissistic one? There's a simple, easy way to do this. I know once we get into life with a narcissist, our life becomes chaotic. So don't analyze the period of time that you're with this person. I want you to think of the period of time before you guys were together. Which of you had the more chaotic history? Long term. Which of you has had struggles going all the way back into high school and earlier? Which of you struggles being close to people or isn't close at all? Maybe you don't have any relationships. Whichever one of you is a narcissistic one. Narcissists often either have sycophants, like think of Batman and Robin. I'm not saying Batman's a narcissist, but Robin's a great example of what people will do around narcissists. They get like these hanger-oners. There's these like yes men, these entourages. They'll get entourages. That's a typical pattern with a narcissist. Or they don't get close to anybody. They keep everybody far away and they just kind of like have like relationships with, hands out kind of relationships. Keeps everybody distant, like text related only kind of. It's very superficial contact with people. Or they have very tumultuous relationships where they burn through them and blow them up and they explode. And they're very highly dramatic. So you're going to see this difficulty with intimacy. You'll see often they have problems with other people, like work or their work jobs, or they make impulsive decisions and they do weird things around money, or they have a lot of financial trouble. And you'll see this chaotic struggle, this turmoil that's going on. Think of the narcissist is a great example of that. Is think of them like a cyclone, and they stand in the eye and everything around them swirls and it's always tumultuous and chaotic. It's always like something's going wrong. I once had a relationship that I kept thinking, once this person gets through the crisis, then it'll get better and her and I could have better footing. No, there was another crisis and then another crisis and then another crisis. I felt the same way with my ex. I felt like our life was always in a uproar. And interestingly enough, now that I'm not in the relationship with either one of these people, my life is very quiet. The uproar wasn't mine, and the uproar was coming from those people. So that's how you know, is they struggle with chaotic lives and a lot of drama. So if there's a lot of chaos and drama, you probably met somebody who's having some issues. I did deal with the question with Spanish eyes, because I was talking to Maura, and then I don't want to miss that. Sorry, I'm trying to remember which platform you guys are on. Whoops, that's one of the things of having two platforms gets a little chaotic sometimes. Okay, so I see the S12 34 28 3's question about how do I trust myself. That's coming up over in TikTok too. It's like how do you recover after being in a relationship? And I'm glad, Brittany, that being online, I love how Brittany is in my online support group, and I love that. I've loved getting to know her more personally because I'm there too. So it's an ability for me to also share and hang out with you guys and to share my life with you, and you to share a bit of your life with me back in more of a direct way where we get to actually see each other. Spanish Eyes, I'm not seeing it. Could you put your question in again so I don't miss it? I'm sorry about that. How do you help my daughter who's in a long-term relationship with a narcissistic partner? So I'll take Kat's question. I'm going to jump over to Instagram afterwards and take S123428-3's question next. So how do you help your daughter, Kat? You can only tell somebody what they're able to hear. This is a truth that therapists are taught very quickly in school. If we give an insight, if you came into me and asked me what I thought was going on, and I could tell by what you were saying you weren't ready to hear probably the truth, then you would either not hear it when I said it or you'd get angry with me. In other words, therapists, psychologists, and therapists are trained to time insight. You just can't say what you see to somebody. They're often not ready to hear it. Even when they tell you the details, they're often still not ready to hear it. You guys all know that. How many times have you, let's give a real honest one about, I've gained some weight because of surgeries and I'm not happy with how I look and feel. And if I put an outfit on and I ask somebody I know really well, do I look a little heavy in this? The truth of the matter is the answer is yes, I do. And I don't want to hear that. I'm not ready to hear that. And maybe my self-esteem's kind of low. Maybe I'm feeling shaky. Maybe I'm going to a party where there's people that I don't know and I'm scared they won't like me. Or I'm scared that, I don't know, I'm scared about something. So you saying that to me would be poor timing, wouldn't be very sensitive. It might be better if you're a really, really close friend of mine and we had that kind of relationship where later you said to me, you've been talking about your weight a little bit. How's that going? How are you doing with that? And then I could share more of what's been happening on behind the scenes. In other words, we have to be sensitive to how we say things and when we say things. So regarding your daughter, you need to wait until there's a right moment where you can say, how is it going with this relationship? I've been kind of worried. You seem stressed. Or I've noticed there's blow-ups at the family get-togethers. How are you doing with that? So I would be very careful what I said. I'd be very careful when I said it, and I'd be very careful about how I said it. Because you want to create an environment of non-judgmentalness. I don't know if that's a word. You want to be a non-judgmental person so that when this person gets ready, your daughter gets ready, and she starts to feel that it is a problem, and she's feeling, because she's going to feel lots of shame, like really stupid for being in this relationship, or really bad, or like maybe there's something wrong with her. You want the relationship with her to be so strong that she knows she can come to you and say whatever it is she needs to say to you for you to be able to be there to be helpful. So what you do now is, I'm not saying be silent, because I know a lot of people like, well, aren't I colluding in the relationship if I say nothing? Yeah, maybe, possibly, but more of the point is, can you show up in a way that doesn't make her feel like she has to choose sides between you and her partner? Like, you won't be in a relationship with her if she does something, unless she takes some action against this relationship. You don't want to put her in that kind of situation, because chances are you will be the one who loses. People who are toxic are very good at driving wedges in relationships. Probably this person's already doing that, already saying that you're not supportive and that you have issues with him or her or whoever. Already they're driving the wedge in. You don't want to add fuel to that and validate it in accidentally, because they will do that. They will set you up for that. So stay polite, stay loving, stay non-judgmental, but also stay invested and supportive, and wait until she comes to you and starts to say things or she's in trouble. Then you can start to say, I would then say, how can I help? I would never weigh in and say, yeah, he's a real asshole. I wouldn't do that. I would just say, how can I help? And then listen. And all of us who've been here, and I know some people are like giving a lot of likes to this right now on Instagram. All of us who've been here, we know our partner's difficult. We're the first to know. We've also probably been hiding how bad things have really been. I know I didn't let anyone know how bad things were, because I didn't want that. I didn't want to have to deal with you and deal with my partner. I already had enough on my plate. I didn't need more. And so don't be the more. Be very careful that you're not the more. Okay, S123428-3. I would love to hear advice about how to trust yourself again. There's been so much abuse now that I'm really negative and unreasonable and I'm not really trying. Yeah, that's the tough part. And I've had to, like, I hear, you know, I'm sure a lot of us still hear the person in our head running us down, making us feel really stupid. It's like we live with this person when they're still not in our life. It's really weird how that happens, how they kind of like embed themselves into our minds like that. So it's not easy. It's just like if you walked into a pricker patch with thousands of thorns and now you're covered in them, you got to pull them out one at a time. Unfortunately, that's how it works. So what I would do is when you hear one, like for me today, I was doing yoga and I could, and he was in my head while I was doing yoga. It's true confession. I had to say, he's not here, and no one's here. I'm safe. I can be myself in my body, in this space. I can be safe. I had to. So that's what I'm recommending that you do, is that when you catch one of those abusive, poisonous, like darts in your mind, that you tell yourself at the same time the truth. You're safe. That's not true. Whatever it is, you repeat and I don't care you don't believe it. That does not matter. I'm not asking you to believe it. In fact, in the beginning, you're not going to believe it. But there's power in telling ourselves things. It takes on a life of its own. It becomes a new truth. You're supplementing it with something new. So say it to yourself anyway. And you do that one after another, over and over, and they will fade. Slowly over time, they'll fade. And then also, I will tell yourself to try one small new thing each however long, once a week, maybe for some of us it needs to be once a day, maybe for some of us once a month, but try something that gets you out of your safety, your tiny safety world, your little bubble that you're in, and try something a little bit different. Maybe it's you try a different food. Maybe you pick up a new hobby, or you reach out to someone who's reached out to you and indicated they'd love to have coffee, but do something that's a little risky just to stretch yourself. That's really good to really stretch yourself. All of this is what Dr. Milstead said at the webinar. And by the way, the webinar with Dr. Lundy Bancroft is February 9th from 12:30 to 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And if you buy that ticket right now, it's on sale with two other webinars. Each of them are priced at $30 and $90 for $50. So you get the price of 3 different webinars for $50. And you get to hear Lundy Bancroft in person. But one thing that Dr. Milstead said in her webinar, which is called Why Can't I Just Leave? So that would be one of the replays you'd get if you bought that package. She said, your voice got real small. Your real self got really tiny, but it didn't disappear. It's still there. You just need to slowly encourage it and slowly turn the volume up. But she's still there, or he's still there. They didn't disappear. They're still there. You just have to nurture that. So I want you to think of that and then see how you can nurture that part of yourself. Great question. And I'm glad you're on the side of healing. That's awesome. You guys are asking really deep questions. I appreciate that. So here's Spanish Eyes. Thank you for asking me the question. Why does a narcissist cheat and then act like nothing ever happened? This is a fascinating one. It would be easy to say they do that because they're just very good at lying. And that is true. They're very good at lying. They're very good at just being deceptive. But here's the other reason why they do that. When you're born, your mind needs to protect itself. And this is what Freud and then his daughter Anna Freud noticed. They noticed what's called defense mechanisms. So if you ever heard of denial or repression or dissociation or sublimation or justification, rationalization, that's all thanks to Freud and his daughter Anna. They helped identify this whole list of things that we do to help our shaky self-esteem feel better about ourselves. And thank you, Maura, for subscribing. I appreciate that. I'm excited. I will send you, Maura, a link to the Facebook group, and so you make sure you can come next week to the Zoom call on Wednesday. So to shore up our shakiness, whenever we feel ashamed or we feel angry or we feel scared, there's things that we do to kind of calm ourselves down, to sort of stabilize ourselves. Well, when you're a baby, you have only access to a few more primitive ones. And then as you grow and your mind gets more developed and sophisticated, you learn better ways to do it. You learn more sophisticated ways to do it. So when you're a baby, you can either pretend it's not happening, denial, or you'll actually make people good or bad. That's called splitting. Or you can compartmentalize, and you'll literally will fragment yourself or fragment time or fragment the experience, compartmentalization. There's a couple other. Projection is another very primitive one. Instead of you feeling ashamed or bad, you'll say they're bad. You'll project it out and say they're awful, or they're doing the wrong things, or it's your fault that you hurt me. And by the way, have you noticed how many of these narcissists use? Yes, they use very primitive defense mechanisms because narcissist ego structure is very fragile and very primitive. It's not very developed. It's not very sophisticated. So one of the big ones they use is compartmentalization, and they literally fragment not just what they do. You can think of compartmentalization like rooms to a house, only instead of them being connecting, they're not. They've locked doors. Big, huge walls and locked doors. So when you step out of one room, so say you're in a relationship with somebody, you're in a monogamous, supposedly a monogamous relationship with somebody, and you live life with this person, and you have dinner, and you guys have your conversation, and then say you stage a fight. I think this is what happened in my marriage. You stage a fight and you storm out. Well, when you storm out of that house or that apartment, you literally, when you shut the door, it's like you locked that life away into another locked area that's gone because the door is locked and the walls are high and there's no windows. And you move into another segment of your life, and you might go out and have another relationship with somebody else. And then whatever you do with this other person, once you leave them, you lock that all up and separate it. And you separate the time, you separate the memories, you separate the experiences. You literally segment them into different containers, different boxes. And that's called compartmentalization. Now, here's the weird part. When you lock that door and move into the new realm, it's as if the other realm that you just left never existed. So when you go back home to whoever you're having a normal relationship with, who doesn't know that you're doing that, and they find out you've been cheating, and they confront you I don't know what you're talking about. When I'm here with you, I'm with you. I'm monogamous to you. This is all that exists right here, right now, with me and you, is this. That other world never existed because that's locked away in another world. And it's almost like I threw the key away. I literally don't remember it. So that's why it's wild. It's really wild. And when you're healthier, time doesn't work like that. Our minds don't work like that. So for the rest of the world, we're like, what? No, it's continuous. It all affects each other. What you do over there affects what you do here with me. It's related, but they don't see it that way. To them, they literally segment their life into these different components. This is another reason why why whenever you bring up a past issue and they say you never let anything go, but you said it never got any closure, and maybe they even promise they revisit it with you later. Can we talk about this? And when I'm in a different space, and then when you do, they say, you never let anything go. Well, it's because once they said to you, can we talk about it later? They locked it away. They literally put it into some other arena of their mind, and to them it's done over, and they don't ever plan to go back. And so when you do, it's why do you have to keep going there? What's wrong with you? Well, because that's what they. It's wild. So I understand it. I just don't. Yeah, it's wild. I know. I'd love to know what you think of that. Is that helpful to know that? It's very strange. So. Oh, someone's saying they're struggling hearing me. Are you all struggling hearing me on Instagram, or is it just one person? Yeah, your guys are liking a lot over there, so I have a feeling that it's just one person. Oh, yeah, so Zane asks, this is great. So I'm over on Instagram right now. I'll come back to TikTok here in a second. Thanks for the hydration reminder. I just did. I'm freezing on TikTok. That's interesting. Huh. I don't know why. Anyway, so cognitive dissonance and narcissistic parents. Yes, it happens with narcissistic parents as well. No, I'm jumping back and forth, hamster. TikTok's next. I'll be back over to TikTok. Cognitive dissonance with narcissistic parents happens, I would say, around, I'm having to think, because we talk a lot about it in pathological love relationships, but we don't really talk about it in regards to, here's one. You know something's not quite right with your parents, and probably is not the way your home runs, the way other people's homes, based on what you see from your classmates, but you know you can't talk about it. And then you end up thinking that maybe it's you. Maybe you're the one that's causing the problems. That would be an example of it. It's a sense of you're not for sure, is your family normal or not normal? Or you're maybe not even for sure what's real. And maybe you're attributing that there's something wrong with you, that maybe you're the odd man out and that you're the problem, instead of seeing that what's happening is as a parental problem, not a you problem. That's how it would show up. It would be more of that. But it happens with toxic families too. It's not just with pathological love relationships. Okay, over in TikTok. There's a lot more activity on TikTok, which makes it a little harder for me to find the questions, for one, which is why, thank you guys for putting your thumbs up. That helps me find them really fast. Black eyes equal dangers. What disorders cause it? Is it just PD, borderline personality disorder? Sly wants to know. I will get to that because I see one above it. My ex told me he feels like he has a tornado in his brain. Is this what he means? You know, my ex said that too. Not a tornado. He just felt like there's something really wrong with him. It could be that he's talking about ADHD, kind of like a buzzing kind of fuzziness. I don't know what your ex is referring to. It could be a lot of different things. It's interesting the words people use to describe interior experiences, though. That's fascinating. So Sly, you asked, does black eye, you know where I see black eyes or kind of odd eyes is with psychopaths. They have an odd stare. Have you ever noticed that? I'm not for sure if there's research behind this, whether or not that funny, cold, dead-eye stare, which almost to us looks like a black eye, you know, like dark eyes. I don't know if that's related to their inability to be affectively connected, emotionally connected. But yeah, it's wild because if I was to able to show you guys pictures of my ex, which I won't because of privacy issues, but you can tell when he was acting out, he would get wild-eyed. He literally like his eyes would flare and he'd stare at this funny little look. He'd take photos of him. You could literally see when he was acting out and he was up to no good versus when he was doing better, doing not well, but doing better. He had a different look that showed up on his face. But it is wild. I don't know if there's research into this, but it's fascinating. So make sure you guys put thumbs up so I know that you're talking to me, because there's a lot of questions and I'm running past them and not seeing them just because there's no thumbs up there. So Jay Walker wants to know, why do parents lie, slander, and turn other families against a targeted child? Great question. That's a fascinating question. I think, well, for one, okay, so parents are no healthier than, they can be very, very toxic, and they can have parts of themselves that are very fragile and shaky, and they don't know how to regulate their tough emotions. So what they often do is, instead of dealing with them, they'll deal with it via a child. So the child will become sort of a picture of the parent or parents' problems. Instead of focusing on what's happening in the relationship, they'll focus on that child instead. They may be not knowing how to deal with the fact that they're heading towards financial collapse and they're angry and scared, but instead they'll focus on Susie's, absences of school, or why is she wearing pigtails today and not having her hair down. They'll focus on one person. And triangulation, that's what you're kind of talking about. So what is a triangulation? So whenever there's a conflict between two people, so say that mom doesn't like Susie's hair up in a pigtails, instead of mom going to Susie and saying, please don't wear your hair that way, I don't like it, and Susie thinks it's my hair, I can wear what I want, mom will then go to, child number one. What do you think of Susie's hair? Can you believe that she's wearing her hair that way? Why would she wear the hair that way? See, she would go to somebody else, and then they would team up against that one person or gossip about that one person. Or they may even say that mom goes to dad. What do you think of Susie's hair? Now, by the way, I do think this is okay for parents to talk to each other. I'm not saying you can't do this, but let's pretend that dad already said, let's pretend this is an issue that, let's make this not dad. Let's make this grandma. So mom goes to grandma and says, can you believe she wears her hair that way? What do you think? And then next time she sees Susie, she says, grandma doesn't like her hair that way either. See, that's another way triangulation works. So it's a way to sort of shore up somebody's shaky power position by kind of like almost tattling in a way. But they do that as a way to regulate and handle all the uncomfortable stuff that they're not handling psychologically within themselves or in the adult relationships. They'll do it by working it out with the children instead. It's very sick, very pathological. And it sucks for the kid because the kid's in a super powerless position. I mean, what do you do as a kid? You know, it's really hard. It's awful. So yeah, as one who is scapegoated, I've been there. It's really hard, and it makes you feel kind of crazy. It's how it feels when it's happening to you. So Blurta wants to know over on Instagram, if a couple goes to therapy, what are the chances a therapist will notice the narcissist? Well, it depends on the therapist's training. That's the long and hard question. It depends on if the therapist knows what narcissistic abuse is, recognizes personality disorders, and they have any specialization in it. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't. And by the way, couples therapy is no longer the primary recommended source of treatment when there is narcissistic abuse. It really is individual therapy is far more effective and safer. I would recommend both individuals get into their own treatment, and then maybe the therapist can coordinate and talk to each other, but I would recommend that you don't try to do this together. Unfortunately, what often happens is a narcissist will do something kind of in an odd way to thwart therapy from being effective, and often gets weaponized as what they learn in therapy against their partner. Emery said, how do I keep smiling? Well, I don't know. I just do. It's my bent. I just refuse to be one of those lays down and die. That's for sure. One last question over on TikTok, and then I'm going to wrap it up today. Thank you so much for this. I will be back next week. I'm not for sure if it will be on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but well, actually, I will be on Monday. Monday, I'm going to be on live. We haven't set a time yet, but it will be with Catherine Klaus, Stand Coaching. If you guys follow Catherine, either on Instagram or on TikTok, her and I are going to go live. Now, she doesn't right now know how to do it with Instagram and TikTok, so we're working on that. I hope she figures it out. But I will probably still stream it on Instagram, even just so you can hear her. But it will be a joint one over on TikTok. So Instagram, I'm hoping she can figure out how to do both. That will be our goal, but well, fingers crossed on that. And one last question. Okay. Oh, so Brittany's like, you never heard of that, but that's your adoptive mother to a T. That's interesting. Yeah, thanks, guys. There isn't really a big question that's come in recently over on TikTok. I'm kind of scrolling through. So let me jump to Instagram and see if there's any big last questions over here before we wrap it up today. Remember to put your thumbs up in front of it so I know that you're talking to me. Yeah, somebody said our first therapist wasn't aware and exploited her vulnerabilities. Yeah, that my therapist with the joint couples therapy, he began to fawn over him. That was really wild. She was pulled in and yeah, was started including him as had him mentoring other men around sexual sobriety, and he wasn't even sexually sober. She didn't know that. She didn't. I mean, he was deceiving her too. I mean, it was, and I watched it. You know, here I was, her and I both had an equal amount of training. She was a PhD in psychology, and I was a PhD in psychology. So we were both, like I said, but I probably had more years of experience than she did. Not that that always matters. It doesn't always matter. But I watched him corrupt it. I watched her starting to fawn over him and fuss over him, keeping him happy. Ugh, it was awful. Yeah, so I really recommend do not do couples therapy. It's common. I think I've heard very large names. You know, I'm thinking like, I think Sandra Brown would agree with me. I haven't listened to see what Dr. Ramani's opinion, but I have a feeling she probably would say the same. But yeah, I've been couples therapist, and I've watched I've had narcissists in the room with their partners, and I'll tell you, it didn't get very far. It's kind of it's a therapist side. It's painful because you know that you've got a split going on in the room, and you know there's like deception happening, and you can't really. You're supposed to like be taking the client is your relation By the way, this is something to think about. I'll leave this with you guys. Ask yourself whenever you're in a room with a therapist, who's the client? You would say, well, I think it's me. No, not necessarily. You're not always the client. For example, say that you are involuntarily committed and you're being evaluated whether or not you should remain in the involuntary commitment and whether or not you should continue and extend the involuntary commitment. Who's the client? It's the hospital. The hospital is the client. They're asking whether or not their petitioning of you is fair and just. You're not the client. They're just assessing the accuracy of the hospital's opinion of you. If you're incarcerated and they think you are not sane and they're evaluating you to see whether or not you understand the charges being held against you, that's the point of a sanity rule, is do you understand what you did and can represent yourself reasonably? Again, you're not the client. The state's the client. The state's the client. So when you're in the room and it's two of you, there's couples therapy, the client is the relationship, not you or your partner. It's the relationship. So always ask yourself, who's the client? It's really important because it will change the focus of treatment depending on that answer. And if you need it to be you, then make sure you stipulate that when you start seeing the clinician, who is the client? If they tell you it's not you and you don't own confidentiality and you don't own a lot of the information around you and other people have a right to it, you need to know that. Because that then may affect what you share, because it may affect your safety and protection of yourself. So just a little tidbit. Just, for example, one thing I do, just by the way, while we're talking about that, insurances get a lot of information about you when you go in, when you see a therapist. So I often don't go in I ask, what are you coding me? What are you saying is my problem? And I have to agree for me to that diagnosis. I would never let them code me with something that would impair me a right to be able to have a job that I want, or to have any kind of like licensing or security clearance. I've seen, for example, pilots have come in. That's a big issue with airline pilots. They can't be diagnosed with certain conditions. So just be aware of your rights around all of this, and it's not always as clear as you think it is. Okay, so I'll end it on that. I'll be back next week on Monday with Catherine. And I'll probably be back near the end of the week as well. Have a really wonderful Christmas, you all. Very, very much so. I appreciate that. It's been wonderful today, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.